All right, welcome everybody. We are so excited to have you here today. This is actually our first non-Excel based snacks and skills, and we're hoping that you can gain knowledge and understanding as to how our fellow teammates do their work and exactly why their roles are so important. Just a reminder, please make sure that you enter into full screen mode and select speaker mode because Katie and Amber will share their video today. If you're on site in Irving, make sure that you've got a laptop if you're not in a Zoom room. Otherwise, I think Lab Lounge is the Zoom room we've got booked out today. All right, so we want to introduce you to your teachers. We've got Katie McLennan and Amber Zarella. You know, Katie, her favorite thing about working at ASC is the people that she gets to work with every day. She actually moved to New Hope 2 months ago, and her team has done a great job of welcoming her. She's mentioned multiple times through the past several weeks working together that her team is very driven, collaborative, and innovative. And it's always rewarding to be in an environment where she gets to teach and learn every day. In her free time, she loves to read and collect books with science and social studies themes. And then Amber, she's been with ASC for nearly 12 and a half years and loves the family atmosphere. She also loves the opportunity that she's had to grow with ASC and is always learning something new. She's been married for 7 years to her husband, Robbie, and they have 2 boys, Taylor, who's 17, and Addison, who's 8. They have 1 puggle, Peanut, and 2 cats, Harley and Ivy. Yes, her husband is a Batman fan. Amber is also a huge basketball fan and loves the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Browns, which, you know, her husband's a Steelers fan, so that makes football season very interesting in their house. On the weekends, she's usually with family and friends at a sporting event, Cub Scout event, or a concert. So she loves all music from bluegrass to hip hop and everything in between. Now that you've met your teachers, let's review the syllabus. For those of you that didn't check this out, today we're going to learn what Katie and Amber can teach us about how ASC buys and manages inventory. If you have any questions along the way, please write them in the chat box. I'll be checking it along the way. And if there's anything we can stop and answer, we'll answer it. And then if not, we'll answer it at the end. And then if you don't feel comfortable putting it in the chat, then or if you can't put it in the chat because you're in a conference room, save your questions for the end and we'll open it up if we have time. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Katie.
Let me get my video on here. Hey, everybody. So let's get into our first slide here. So our work is really split into 3 major chunks, and at any time they really intersect and overlap. There's not really like a linear timeline for these different aspects of what we do. Within Analyze and Prepare, that's going to be first thing in the morning. Usually we're checking our systems, we're analyzing information, we're pulling data for the day, and really preparing ourselves to move through to the execute functions. Execution consists of actually writing and sending out POs to vendors, and then monitoring is happening constantly. We're keeping track of POs, we're keeping track of ongoing projects, and throughout all of that, there's a ton of collaboration, both within our teams and externally to other departments, but we'll go into more detail about that later. So I'm going to get into the Analyze and Prepare piece of our work now. And typically we start out with what we call a buyer checklist, and that tells us what we need to do on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And from there, we start out the day by checking our systems. So we get information from a couple different places, and some of it is pulled directly from the ERP systems in auto-generated emails that come to us daily or weekly. Some of the info we get from the Lapine online dashboard, which was recently created so that buyers in all different territories across all different ERP systems would have consistent access to the same type of information. And then other information we use is pulled from purchasing directors who have created their own reports to pull specific data from our ERP systems so that we have things that we need along the way that we've determined we need and just created. So after we get our system pulled for the day, our information pulled from the day, we move on to receiving discrepancies, which are really important for us to keep on top of, because that is what guarantees that our inventory is correct. So receiving discrepancies are when a PO is received at the warehouse. As the receiving crew is going through and checking it in, they make notes of anything that is shorted, anything that was overshipped, or anything that was damaged. And then they submit all those reports to a place on checklist where we all have access to them. And then the buyers go in and review them. And if anything is discrepant, we deal with the vendors and accounts payable directly to get those resolved, so that we're paying for everything that we get and we're not paying for things that are shorted or damaged. So that leads in really nicely with the next aspect, which is networking. And we're constantly networking with our team. As a supervisor, I am talking with my team constantly. We're working with them to find and resolve inventory issues. We want to be the first ones to know if a line is getting low or something has spiked in demand, anything like that that would direct our attention to placing a PO right away, so that we can eliminate as many shortages to customers and keep inventory moving through smoothly. That's our main goal. So in order to do that, we're not only networking with our own team and following up on issues that might arise, but we're working with the warehouses, with AP, with customer service, so that we're communicating things in real time, and so that they also have the information and current data they need to operate smoothly on their end. So I'm going to pass this over to Amber now, and she's going to walk through what this all actually looks like.
Thanks, Katie. Do you want to go to the next slide, Lauren? Lauren? Can you pull the slideshow back up?
Amber, do you have the slideshow on your screen that you can click through?
I didn't.
Hold for technical difficulties, folks.
Got it, never mind. So some of the things that we pull out of our systems, a few reports is what I'm going to share. Sorry, or Katie, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the first report, and this is what we call our backorder report. We get this daily through email. It's system generated, and what it shows is every item that we shorted to the customers the day before, and what we had on hand, and when was the last time it was received. So we use this report for a few different things. It can tell us if we had something in stock and didn't pull it. It will bring attention to things that we are just completely out of that we might not have known about, things like that. So I'll just go through a couple of examples here real quick. So Dogwell here is at the top of the list, and we shorted 2 customers, same item, and we don't have any in stock. So this is something that a buyer might go look at and say, is this something that we need to bring back in? Is it discontinued? What was the reason for the outages? Here is an item that a customer ordered 1, and we shipped 0, but we had 477 on hand. So this particular report was saved on the 6th of July. The last time we got it was in June. So this is something that our inventory control team would go and look for in the warehouse. See, was it in the primary when it was pulled? Is the primary correct? Is it still sitting in the receiving and never got put on the shelf? What was the reason for the shortage? So that way we can get things in the correct spot, so everyone knows where they are when we get them pulled for the customer and stop the out of stock. A second report that we look at is our fill rate report. We do this daily and weekly. This is for the East, and we usually fill in all warehouses for the East. This is just the Northeast was saved for this day. And what a buyer would do with this particular information, we have this column here that's called the red and yellow tab, and what it shows is where were our biggest issues for the day before. Same thing, a little more vendor related rather than item related. And again, this would tell a buyer that selling shoes is a pretty big issue. We need to see what's going on. Do we have a PO in? Do we need to get it expedited? How can we stop the out of stocks as fast as possible and get product back to our customer? And then this last report, we call this our at-risk report. Some other regions call it a spike report or a danger report. And what this shows is items that there is more than 30% on sales order compared to what we have on hand. So the two items I have in yellow here are Bear and the Rat. And you can see we had 1,200 on sales order, about 2,400 on hand. So our risk of running out is at about 50%. The next one, we have a little under 1,100 on sales order, 1,500 on hand, and so our risk is 71%. So a buyer would go through this, see what their big problems are, and this might signify that they need to get an order placed. So with that, I will hand it back over to Art. Stop sharing this thing. It won't let me stop sharing. Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Okay, so if one of those items told us that, you know, we need to go and place an order, we will go into our execute phase and see what we need to place. So in the Northeast, for this, we go into our ERP system and pull out data, both sales history and current inventory data. And from that, we put it into Excel. And from there, once it's in Excel, it's much more usable to analyze and go through and do some decision-making processes on what we need to order, what we don't need to order. We then import that back into Sage and then turn that into a PDF PO, which then gets sent to our vendors, and we print out a copy for our warehouse so that way they know what we were expecting when the product comes in. And so now I will show you a few ways that how we do that in our system. Okay, so the system that we have in the Northeast is called Sage. Shrink myself. This is our Sage system. So what we do is we go into our inventory management module and into customer reports, and then we have this report. It's called possible short date. We used to use it to find things that were possibly short dated in our warehouse, and now we've added some columns to it, and it's very useful for ordering purposes. It gives us all the information we need. So based on that last report that I showed you, where we were in danger of running out of stock on Bear and the Rat, that is what I am going to show you how we order. I'm just going to my other screen. So when we click on this possible short date, it wants us to put in some parameters of what we're looking for. So I'm going to put in today's year, the month, and here we could put in anything we want. You could do, if a buyer wanted to see all of their vendors all at one time, they could put A to Z in here, add the range, and it would show everything they buy. Today, we only want to look at Bear and the Rat. So we put in the vendor's code, which is Bear for the Northeast. And we add it to the values. If I wanted to look up 3 or 4 vendors all at once, I could add them here until I was finished. And then it's going to ask what warehouse I want to work in. 000 is our main warehouse. These other ones are virtual warehouses for short-dated product or things we're waiting for credit on, or scrap warehouse, things like that. But we want to know what's sitting in our main warehouse that we pull for customers. And then here it's asking for a buyer code. So if a buyer did want to pull all of their vendors, they could put in their code here, which is their initial. But since I'm only pulling one vendor, I can just pull all buyers, and it's only going to give me the one vendor. So from here, I would normally hit OK, but I already have this pulled to save some time. And this is what it looks like when it comes out and then we export it into Excel. So from this view, it's not very user-friendly, but I have written a macro that my team and I use. And to do a macro, you go to View, and then you click on View Macros. And this possible short date is what I named it. You click Run. And what this does is it puts it in a much more user-friendly form. A macro, just when you write one, all you do is record all the steps that you would do, but it has to be steps that you would do every single time you pull this report or the Excel file that you're working on. So, for example, these first two items here, this means that they're discontinued, and I will delete those. But if I did that in my macro, it would delete the first two items every time I pull a report. And not every vendor is going to have the first two items discontinued, so that's not something you want to put in a macro. But I'm going to walk through these columns really quickly and then show you how we come up with an order. So we have our vendor, our item ID, description, purchase using the measure. If something has to be bought in a case, it will be here. If we buy it one at a time, you see one. So these particular, this is a frozen yogurt brand, and we have to buy them 8 at a time. They come on a layer of 21 and a pallet of 168. Then these two items here show us if something's discontinued, like I just said. Here's a couple items that are brand new. They're future items, and some seasonal items, which means we only order them sometimes. These happen to be samples. So it's probably a vendor-driven, only if we tell you can have them. We have the weight, which helps when we're calculating our minimum. When was the item first going to come into our system? This is our last 3 months of sales plus the current month. It gives us an average. This tells us what's the average versus the last month. So are we increasing in sales? In this particular one, we are. Our average is too low. What do we have on PO, on hand, sales order? We can add in this back order column. I'm not going to do it to save time. What do we have available today when you take your on hand and subtract anything that you have on sales order? So when I said that we were 50 and 70% in danger of running out, you see those quantities here. When's the last time we got it in our warehouse? And then this really gets into what do we need to buy. So before I go there, I said that, our averages are too low. So if you look at this, this is a frozen yogurt, like I said, so it's a summertime product. It sells better in the summer. We do have it all year long. So you can see, so this was July, June, May, and April. So in June, it sells much better than in May, and so far better than in April. So because we already sold 600 in June, we have 200 more on sales order already, and this was on the 5th of July, so only a couple of days had gone by. I'm going to go ahead and change this average. And this is something that we can't really get system driven on. This is what we need buyers for this intellect of looking at things and saying, okay, well, I know that this is going to sell better for the next couple months. So this is something I would probably go ahead and just change to, I'm going to change it to 800. This one, we had 700 in sales last month. We have 1,300 on sales order today. I know that that is for a large customer who is doing a event, like an ice cream party for their customers. So I know that that number is not going to continue to increase. So I'm going to go ahead and bump this up to 1,000. And same thing here, I'll bump that up to 900. So when I change these numbers, it automatically changes what I need. So I'm going to hide a couple columns, just put this all on one screen. So what's this quantity in 2 weeks? So 2 weeks is our lead time for this particular vendor and most of our vendors. If a vendor takes longer, a buyer can change this formula on the fly. So what it does is it takes what do we have available after everything's full. It adds in anything that's on PO. and then it takes a monthly average, and it's going to take half of that. 2 weeks is a half a month, and it takes that out. So what will we look like 2 weeks from today? How much will we have in stock? About 310. Then this column says how many, what you have in 2 weeks divided by how many you sell a month. How many months is that? A lot of people in the company speak in days, so if I just multiply this by 30, it would tell me I got 11.6 days on hand. So, so this is how much do you need for a month. And a month is about the average of what we keep on hand for any given item. Again, if this is a 3 or a 4 week lead time, a buyer can change this formula to add on weeks for how much stock we want to keep, depending on what the lead time is for the vendor. So this takes what is a monthly average and subtracts what we'll have 2 weeks from now. So what do we need in order to carry a month's supply? Then the number of cases takes that number and divides it by how many come in a case, because we have to buy it by the case. Then this takes that number and divides it by the layer, and then this divides it by the pallet. So some vendors do make you buy by the layer or the pallet, some do not. This particular vendor, we have to buy by the pallet. We don't have a choice. So it says I need 61, and I have to buy 168 cases. So here's where a buyer is going to say, okay, do I wait? And based on we only have 11 days of stock 2 weeks from now, my answer is going to be no. Would I get it from another DC because I really don't want to add 100 cases? Or do I go ahead and bite the bullet and buy it? So what I do sometimes is I just put it like if it was on PO today. So I'm going to take the 168, multiply it by 8, get our region, and that'd be 1,300. It tells me we're going to have about 62 days if I do that, which is about a 2-month stock. That'll get us through the rest of the summer. So my answer would be yes, I'm just going to go ahead and buy the whole 168. So I'll change this. Same thing here. I'm going to get through the summer and then 168 here. So now I have my order. I'm not going to buy anything down here. If these new items were available, I'd go ahead and get them. But for today, for this purpose, we're not going to do that. So from here, I would save this. The reason we save it is because if someone says, hey, why did you order so much 2 months ago, I can go back and I have something to look at that says, well, here's what the data was telling me at that point in time. Or, holy smokes, we ran out, why didn't you order more? Again, here's what the data was telling me at the time I ordered. So from here, I can put this into a form that I can import into our system to actually make the PO. To do that, I just need the quantity that I'm buying. I can get rid of this. I'm going to add in the date that I think it's coming. And so we said it's a 2-week lead time. I don't have a calendar near me, but for instance, the 30th. And copy that into the rest of the item. And then we're going to save this as a CSV, and that's just a type of Excel file. It's used commonly for importing into systems. It's called Common Delimited, and it takes your information and separates it by commas into a text format, so that way the system can read it. And you just do that by coming down here and picking the comma delimited file. Let's save that. And now from there, I can go back into our ERP system and I can import it in. So to do that, we go into Visual Integrator, and we have this set up as a job. So we have import purchase orders or assign purchase orders. So if I was ordering Blue Buffalo or Champion, something that we can write several trucks at one time, I can actually import them all at once. I just have to give them each a PO number by adding one more column to the file. But I'm only importing one today, so I will use this. I go and I find the file that I just saved. Sometimes it gives me a hard time. and then I test it. And it'll ask if I want to just test a couple records or if I want to test all records. And then I can view what it's telling me that it imported. So I know I only have 3 SKUs. I can open one of these, and it shows that it's a bear and the rat. It's 168 units, and I said it would be here around the 30th of July. And so that is all good to go. I can accept it into our system. I can look at the same thing again, 3 items, and it tells me that the PO number is 15724. So from there, I will go to our purchase order module and open the PO. So I type in 15724, it's bear and the rat. I ordered it today. I said it would be here around the 30th of July. The 3 items, they all have 168 apiece. And then the system automatically adds this PO closed item for us. And when the receiving team gets the PO and they check in everything, they will receive 1 PO closed item. This signifies to the system that the PO is now complete and it can go through the close process. And so from here, we would print it. And we export it to Excel. And here's what our finished PO looks like. So the PO number, bear and the rat, when I expect it, the items, and a total at the bottom. So from here, I would go ahead and hit print it to our warehouse, and then I would export it to a PDF and then send that PDF to our warehouse or to our vendor, and then wait for follow-up. So from here, I will stop sharing. It will let me. Can you take it back over, Lauren?
Yeah, I know, Katie, you need to share your screen. And if I share my screen, yeah, it'll stop. So just a second.
I'm pretty sure we were going to go back to the slideshow to see the execution factors wrap up first. Or not. I can jump right into my screen if you want.
Okay, we'll talk about the decision making.
I've got it. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so as I went through there, we talked about a few things that we look at as far as making decisions on do we buy the product, do we not buy the product. And some of those things are going to pop up here as to what a buyer thinks about other than just numbers. So promotions could come from anywhere from a VM, customer service, sales. They could say, hey, you know, customer X wants this promotion, and depending on the size could tell us we need to go look and see if we need to place an order. We also have some large customers like PSP who run monthly promotions, and they give us a forecast of what they think we're going to sell. We put that information into our ERP, and it helps us plan for the next month better. Super Zoo and trade shows usually have large orders that come through. Right now we're looking at Super Zoo orders and placing POs against those. Minimum order quantities. So not only, I mean, I told you like bear and the rat, we have to buy by the pallet. And if we didn't have to buy that by the pallet, but I needed 150 cases and not a whole 168, we also think about how does this affect our warehouse? How will the product come in? Will it be stacked nicely? And we try to make it the most efficient for both the vendor and our warehouse team, because we don't want them spending extra time that's not necessary on breaking down the product. So, but another minimum could be weight, it could be dollars, or it could be pallet or layer minimum, or even a total case quantity. So it just depends on the vendor, and that's something the buyer has to know. We talked about bear and the rat being a seasonal item. And so seasonal isn't just holiday. Some things we have to think about right now, we're in flea season, so our flea items sell better. One we all kind of miss is dental month, which is in February, and so all of our dental SKUs spike in February, and it's something we need to think about in December and January. And some of our regions even carry like pet safe ice melter, which we also have to think about the seasons and when will winter end. So, demand matching, do we sell enough to meet minimum? I was talking about that there in the red, do I buy it now? Do I try to get it from somewhere else? Do we have the demand for the minimum that we are held to? Budget, buyers can't just buy whatever product they want just to have 100% fill rate all the time and meet our goals. We have to meet our goals within a budget to make the company successful. So that's something we're always thinking about as well. Lead time, how long does the product take to come in, will make us decide how much should we safety stock do we keep and how often do we order. And then vendor reliability is a big one. If we have a vendor who is very reliable, comes in on time, always fills us complete, we are more likely to keep a little less safety stock on them. And if we have a vendor who always shorts half our order, is always a week late, never shows up on time, those we might have to keep a little bit extra so we can ride those waves of the issues that come along with that vendor that we might not be prepared for. So all of those things are something that we have to take into consideration when we buy that one SKU that we're looking at. Does it hit any of these things? And if so, how's that going to sway our decision? So, with that, Katie's going to show you a little bit of what I did, but how they do the same thing in the AS400 system.
Yeah, so let me bring up my screen here. Can you see that black screen?
Yep, we're good, Katie.
Okay, so what Amber just went through as far as making purchasing decisions and all the formulas that we use, those are all the same factors and formulas and everything that we use in the West to make buying decisions. But we have a couple major differences. And the first major difference is that I use my ERP, this is AS400 that you're looking at right now, for everything in the PO process start to finish. So she jumps into Sage, she works through Excel, it goes back into Sage. We use AS400 for the whole thing. So like Sage though, we start out with, we can put in whatever parameters we want to run an order. So she put in the bear and the rat, her buyer, that sort of thing. I've already done that here. We're looking at what we call a suggested order, which is basically the information that spits back to us once we put those parameters into the system. So this is just for my knowledge right now. This isn't something that a vendor would see or anybody outside of purchasing, but it gives me an estimation of all the items it thinks I might need to order based on current inventory levels and some of the other factors that Amber listed. And then as a buyer, I would go in line by line and sort of review every one of these items. So we'll start on this screen here. What I'm looking at here is a couple main things. This is the buying information screen, and this exists for every item on a suggested order. So I would go into this and look at a couple quick things to determine how much I'm gonna put on order. First of all, back order quantity here. If there's any back orders in the system, that means if a customer has already tried to order this and we were out of stock or we couldn't fill the whole thing and they opted to leave it on an open order rather than just delete it or ship it or whatever, if there's any open orders for this in the system, it'll show up here. Future quantity, what my system calls a future quantity, is where we would have any customer forecasts that we've loaded in the system. So some of our major chains like PSP or Mills, they give us forecasts on a regular basis based on promotions that they're running or events that they have coming up. And we're able to actually put those into our ERP and account for those demands so that the buyer has visibility here to buy up extra for those customers. It's going to show what I currently have on hand. If this item was already on PO, that quantity would be here. And right here, there would be the date for when I expected that PO to arrive. And then after all those factors, what I'm left with right here. Now we also operate off of days and weeks on hand. So right now it's telling me this is about 21 days on hand, which is a little low. I need to put this on order. And then a couple other major things. This says demand, but this is actually the real sales data for the past year. So as you can see, this ships pretty consistently. The numbers are pretty pretty solid. There's no major spikes or dips. This tells me it's a top selling item, so that's good for me to know. And then this forecast here, we really just look at this first number because this factors in an average of the last 3 months of demand. So since I'm not buying right now for, the middle or end of next year, I'm looking at what this number is suggesting. It thinks we're probably going to sell based on real sales data here. So we are looking at all those same factors, but it's all in one screen here. And instead of having the formulas available for us to sort of manipulate and view in real time, like the East can do in Excel, all of that is built into our ERP's programming. And we can manipulate all those things behind the scenes. But once it spits out a suggested order to me like this, this is what I'm going to be looking at to make a buying decision. So a couple things that outside of the basic statistics we would be thinking about, Amber just touched on. We want to know if these are seasonal items. We actually have a way in the West to code that up here if it's a seasonal item. And instead of looking at the last 3 months of demand, it'll look at the last month of demand, and then it'll go to the previous year's sales of 2 months in the future. So it's looking both forward and backwards to see what did we sell last month and should I expect any spikes coming up. And that's a really helpful tool when we have things like summer or winter items that really sell a lot at certain times of the year. It sort of gives us a heads up, hey, in the next month or two, this might spike. So it alerts us to that. The other thing that we would look at is, going back to my first page here, standard pack in my system is what is referred to as the minimum order quantity. So like Amber had to buy a full pallet of those frozen treats, we have minimums that we're held to for certain vendors as well. And it depends on the type of item. A lot of times big bags you can just buy in a layer. Sometimes you have to buy them in full pallets. It really depends. So this one I have to buy in layers, and I have to buy 10 cases is how many are in a layer. So I have to buy at least 10 cases if I'm going to buy this at all, which for this item is fine because I sell a lot more than that. But taking all of those things into account, the system gives me a number right here, how many it's suggesting I might put on order based on some of this information here. It also tells me right here, if I put this much on order, I'll have about 29 days on hand. And because this is a top selling item and it's Blue Buffalo, the thing that I know that the system doesn't know, which is why we're always needing buyers, we're never going to get to a place where we can just have the system like generate what we need and place orders directly with vendors without having somebody think about it. Because the big piece that we need buyers for is to understand the factors that can't be calculated. So what I mean by that is the reliability of a vendor is a really big one. Blue Buffalo ships pretty consistently every 2 weeks. Right now, I haven't been getting a lot of shortages for them, so I pretty much know when I place an order with them, I'm going to get what I order and I'm going to get it in a pretty timely fashion. But the system doesn't know that. It just assumes all vendors are reliable vendors. But if we have like a big storm, if we're in the winter and trucks are getting delayed, or if a vendor ships on time, but they're having manufacturing issues, so they might ship, but I'm only going to get half of what I placed on PO. When we have unreliable vendors like that, we have to take into account ordering more and keeping more on hand because we have to account for the time lost, either because I didn't get all of what I ordered or it's going to take longer, those types of things. And because in purchasing we're always held to a budget, that makes a really big impact on the decisions that we make when it comes to buying. Because with a reliable vendor like this, I can afford to keep less on hand because I know I can reorder it and do it frequently and get what I expect. But when we're held to a budget and I've got a lot of unreliable vendors, sometimes we have to make more tough decisions and we have to try to keep more on hand. But if we can't always buy as much as we want, that's where these hard decisions come in. The other thing that Amber touched on too is that when it comes to minimum order quantities and layers here, if let's see, this one has 10 layers. Sometimes we have notes in the description of how many layers are on a pallet, 5 high. So this would tell me there's 10 to a layer and there's 5 high on a pallet is our sort of shorthand for that. So that would be 50 cases to a layer. if I can afford, if I could order 30 cases, it's what it's telling me, and have just under a month on hand, I could do that and it would be a safe bet. But because I know if I order a full pallet of this, the warehouse will have an exponentially faster time receiving it, because they can just grab the whole pallet and put it away and check it off. They don't have to break down the whole thing and count every box. If I know that and I can take the extra inventory, which for this item I can, if I want to put 50 cases on order, I still have about a month on hand. And now I've been able to make a decision that I know will impact receiving positively. And that helps us because our stuff gets in faster, things are more efficient. So all the decisions we make touch different departments in different ways. So on that note, we finished off the execute slide. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And if Lauren, can you bring up the monitoring slide for me? Unless there's another one I missed in between there. Okay, so for the monitoring section, at all times, we have lots of open POs. There's rarely a time where I might just have like one or two that I'm waiting to land, because we're buying for different vendors, we're buying every day, and it's normally a couple weeks before they get here. That equates to a lot of tracking, a lot of monitoring, because that's our responsibility too. It's not like once we send the PO off, it's like, oh, hope it gets here, hope we get it, hope it fills. We're responsible for everything until it's received and like able to ship to customers. We're on top of this. So because of that, we're always going back to the calendar and we're always going back to the clock. We have a shared calendar actually in the ASC intranet that we use with the warehouses in the West, and it is the information in it is updated because it connects directly with AS400, our ERP. So when I place a PO, some vendors receive them EDI, which means I hit a button and it electronically goes directly to the vendor system. But the majority of our vendors, we submit PDFs to. So just like Amber shows, she had a, like a physical copy that she would then email off to a vendor. We do that too. But for in the West, once it's created in AS400, the warehouse has visibility to it. So that's really important because the warehouses are the ones who are going to be communicating with vendors and carriers as far as making appointments, if there's delays, things like that. But on a daily basis, part of purchasing's workload is checking up on the status of all the POs that we have open at any given time. So that means when your PO is 2 or 3 weeks out, there's not much you're really worried about at that point. But once you get to be within a week or a few days, if it's a PO that requires appointments and you don't see that it has an appointment, that would be a flag to the buyer to immediately reach out to the vendor or the carrier if they work with them directly and say, hey, we see this hasn't been confirmed with the warehouse yet. The warehouse has a rule that they schedule appointments from within 72 hours of a carrier's requested delivery. So if it gets to be too far to the last minute, if my PO is due tomorrow and the carrier doesn't call until today, it's possible I might not be able to get it in for another 3 days or so. So we want to stay ahead of that so that POs don't get delayed and we don't have product coming in late and then customers are getting shorted and it's a huge mess. So we want to make sure we're staying on top of keeping track of appointments. And then because we have this shared calendar, we can code the POs so that we can see if it's scheduled, if the truck has arrived at the warehouse, if receiving has physically been completed on that PO. There's all these statuses so that all these different departments like warehouse receiving or the admins at the warehouse or us in purchasing, we can sort of keep track of these POs without having a million emails flying around. We just have this tool that we all utilize to sort of keep in contact. And because of that, another piece of sort of the result of our staying on top of that, why it's important, not only just because it's our responsibility to track POs and make sure they get here, make sure everything is in a timely manner, but if we see or if we hear that a PO is going to be delayed because of the weather, the vendor, receiving behind, whatever it is, that prompts the buyer to go into our ERP and roll out the expected date so that it's further out or so that we know what the date is. We want to keep that up to date at all times because that is something a lot of other departments use. Receiving uses it to determine how fast they're going to schedule a PO. Maybe the vendor did a great job and got a PO out in 3 days and the due date isn't for 3 weeks. So receiving takes those things into account. If we might not schedule that one immediately, if we've got other POs that have been in transit for 2 weeks and need to land faster, it's okay to push that first one out a little bit. The bigger thing too is with customer service, they see those PO due dates on their end. So if they're on the phone with a customer, we're out of stock on something, they want to know when we're going to get more. It's really important for us to have that information accurate so that they can help them, so customers can plan and place orders and we can ship them in full. And then of course sales uses those dates in the same capacity. So that's the major chunk of how we monitor and what we're doing. The last big piece is the collaboration part of this. So I've mentioned, and Amber mentioned a couple times, that purchasing touches almost every other department at ASC. We work with a ton of different folks, and we're working with other purchasing departments, we're working with our own teams, as well as all these other departments. So I just want to give you a couple quick examples of what those things are. Probably several of you in this meeting work with us already, but the purchasing leaders are communicating with each other all the time. So I'm in meetings with Amber, Steve Littell, and Brad and Sandy and everybody when we're dealing with a lot of the same issues a lot of times, either because we're having issues with the same vendors who, if they're a source issue, if they just aren't manufacturing, we all feel the effects of that. There's other times where we have regular transfers that run from West Territories to East Territories or vice versa, and we're communicating to get those in on time and make sure those go smoothly so that we can serve customers in all territories, whether we're able to order directly from the vendor or not. We also have a weekly call on here. It says IBL, it's our inbound logistics team, which is a group of folks who help us to save money and optimize our shipping. They've got great freight contracts. We use containers, we use rails, we use trucks. We pick up from vendors in certain territories and ship all over the country. Because of these guys, it saves us a lot of money in freight, and a lot of times it helps us to get our product faster, helps us get better pricing because the vendor isn't putting so much time and energy into figuring out how to ship us stuff. So that's a huge efficiency collaboration that we work with regularly. I've already mentioned receiving and ops several times. They're probably the folks who we deal the most with because they are the other department who is most directly handling what we create. So when we're dealing with POs and inventory, or if things aren't shipping, they're the ones we ask to see, can you count how much is physically in the warehouse? Can you tell me if this arrived? Was this actually damaged? You know, is this vendor rescheduling with you, or are you guys behind, or whatever? Like, they're the ones who really they execute a lot of what we create in order to make it happen. So without the warehouses, we can order whatever we want, but it won't get received into inventory and become available for customers. So that's a huge deal. Branch leaders are right there on top of that and helping us. We had a monthly call for a long time set up with all the ops teams. So once a month we get a chance to touch base with their receiving and shipping departments. And that's especially helpful because a lot of times we're on opposite schedules. So having that sort of open communication and the opportunity for collaboration is a big deal. Vendor management is the group who negotiates with other vendors to bring on new vendors, to help discontinue vendors, to help us with sales. We network a lot with vendor management to make sure things are moving smoothly, not slowly, fast is great, and making sure that we don't have excess inventory piling up, all that. And of course, everything reaches back to our customers. And purchasing doesn't deal directly with customers a lot, but everything that we do is driven for the end result of being able to service our customers and service them well. And really, when we do that, purchasing is pretty invisible to the customers, and that's kind of how it should be. So that's what I've got for you on the collaboration slide here. I think that's the end of our actual slideshow. If Lauren or Amber, you have anything else to add for me?
No, thank you, Katie. I think you guys did a great job of outlining, what you guys do and how you do it, why it's so important. Does anybody have any questions? We've got a few minutes if anybody does want to unmute and ask a question. I'm sure Katie and Amber would love to help you guys understand anything that maybe didn't make sense or something you want to know a little bit more about. All right, Katie, Amber, I think that means you guys did just a perfect job of explaining everything. But we really do appreciate everybody who joined today, and we hope that it was, valuable, that you guys were able to take something away and learn, again, how we're buying and managing inventory. Maybe their role makes a little bit more sense and some things are able to tie together. If anybody does think of any questions after we're done here, then feel free to shoot Katie or Amber a message. I know they'll be happy to answer those for you. But again, thanks everybody so much. And especially thank you, Katie and Amber, for taking this time to get all this together. It was a lot of time and energy and effort. So thanks. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you for letting us share what we do on a daily basis with others.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, everybody have a great day.
Thanks.